Hello and welcome to our webinar today. We've still got folks joining, so we're just going to give them about 2 minutes before we kick off. John, we'll have to do background music next time while we're waiting for all the Zoom participants to join. We need a little tune going.
It feels awkward, right? To wait in silence.
I know, I'm just watching the numbers here and I still see a few people joining, so we'll be patient.
Oh, definitely. For next time, we should include that. Yep.
Yep, you do not want me trying to carry a tune in the background there. Although we did include silent in the title, so maybe we're okay without the background music. All right, looks like most people are in the Zoom, so I think let's go ahead and kick off. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Beyond the Spreadsheet, the Silent Cost of Data Chaos in Regulatory Affairs. We'll be covering this topic today with John Popp. And if you want to just bring up the next slide there. John is our manager at Solutions for regulatory data management, and John's going to cover how you can get data to work for you. So he'll share some examples of what we've done with clients. I think a lot of you have probably experienced the fact that when you've got data in a lot of spreadsheets, you're spending time hunting for it, you're spending time manipulating it, you're spending time just trying to find the right piece of data for the work that you need to do. And it's a very common challenge. It's something that we've dealt with ourselves as a consulting company. And it's something that John and his team have put a lot of effort into figuring out how can you really make data work for you rather than you working for the data. And with that, if you just want to click over to the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of background on us, and then we'll jump into the topic. So Celigence is a regulatory consulting firm. We work with both pharmaceutical companies and medical device clients. And one of the big things with us is that we've created a lot of in-house technology to help support the regulatory work. So beyond just your traditional consulting firm, we've really invested a lot in the technology and the process to streamline the work that we do for clients. John, if you can go over to that next slide. We have 3 different software products. The 2 on the far, the Captus is used for writing, both technical writing, for example, CMC updates, and medical writing on the device side for CERs. And we leverage AI in there to support that writing and literature reviews. And then we have 2 other software products, DOSXplorer and DOSScriber, focused on writing for ECTD, and then viewing and the dossier management. So very good products to help support and streamline the work that you as regulatory leaders are doing. John, if you want to go over to that next slide. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to John to walk through the agenda and jump into the topic of reducing data chaos. And you are in for a treat because John lives and breathes this and has some great practical experience to share today. John?
Thanks, Erin, for the introduction. Setting the bar quite high here today, but I like it. No, thanks for kicking us off here today. I will quickly, or before I quickly lead us through the agenda for today, First of all, thanks everybody for joining here. I know it's not a given that you give us the next hour basically to talk about this topic. As Aaron already said, it's quite close to my heart, close to what we do as a company on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, felt the need that yes, a lot of initiatives, talks are ongoing about this topic. Today, the main aim for this session is to provide my view on the whole subject of data chaos. So for agenda-wise, first would like to start actually defining what's the main problem before we then shift more towards the solution. So what is happening in industry at this very moment, and where do opportunities lie, where companies can basically improve or start working on some of those things. Deliberately try to keep this simple and clearly structured, since of course there's opportunity to dive into any of those things I will mention today in dedicated sessions, right? This today is more of zooming out a little bit, realizing where we stand and what we as an industry still need to go through.
Yep, and I'll
At the
just
end,
add, we're doing I was just going to say we're doing
yeah.
Q&A at the end. So if you want to put your questions into the Q&A tab, John will go over all of those at the end of the session.
Thanks, Aaron. That's exactly where I wanted to go. Plus, right, keep in mind, I think Zoom already warned you about this, but the session will be recorded, just so that you are aware. Let's kick it then off. Data chaos and regulatory affairs. Preparing this presentation, it's where do you start with the chaos, right? I actually thought let's start with a confession. I don't know if you would agree. I have been a lot of times in a situation where you're looking for a specific piece of information, then somebody refers you to a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet has a certain name with maybe a suffix final draft version 5. And then you think it is the right file, but you're still not sure if it actually is. That's the unfortunate reality we're living in the sense that that's also why the title of this webinar was chosen in a way, right? Of course, a bit provoking in a sense that we're relying on spreadsheets for the work we do. But it's basically almost a reality check. Where do we stand? Are we still stuck with documents? I think it's a fair statement to say yes. I mean, submissions we do these days in regulatory operations in pharma are PDF based, right? I mean, you prepare your dossier models according to the structure. Yes, data goes into it, right? But it is PDF based, so document based. There are, of course, things, initiatives around structured data, IDMP / PMS. I actually promised myself to not go too much today into IDMP, but it's also something we do quite a lot for our clients, with our clients. But what's basically there, yes, the push for structured data is there, but what we see almost across the board, the adoption is quite uneven. There are companies, at least pushing for fully utilizing the benefits of IDMP, but for I think some, if not most of the folks out there, it's still mainly a compliance requirement. So basically, yes, we need to tick off the box. In general, right, disconnected systems, I think that's something, right, what I already tried to explain with the example at the beginning. You're looking for, I don't know, for example, product data. You have a spreadsheet where you might find the information or you might not find it. A lot of times we rely on document exchange, which also might hide certain things in email communication, right? And then you almost get to this kind of tribal knowledge within the company, right? That you need to first find the right person to talk to before you actually get that piece of information you were looking for initially. So basically with that, I still believe, right, structured data is the future. That's also why I do this job, why I like this topic so much, because yeah, I think it's still something where the entire industry needs to make this step up, right? Yes, we're pushing for it, structured data submissions and yeah, structured data management, but it is something where yeah, the gap is constantly growing in the sense of we're still relying on legacy tools when it comes to managing certain pieces of the whole puzzle. How can you actually see that? I mean, what does it mean, data chaos? Right? If we zoom in a little bit into the chaos on a daily basis, what does it look like? Right? Actually, starting with almost the worst case scenario, you have submission errors and queries from health authorities due to inconsistent product data. A lot of manual rework duplication within your teams. I know that yeah, teams are spending hours and hours of copy pasting information between spreadsheets. Chasing down the latest version of a document is always yeah, a task which keeps teams busy. Of course, as a leader or manager in your team, you know that your team can spend their efforts more wisely than chasing the information. I mentioned already, right? Submissions based on submission errors or queries you get, right? It will lead to delayed submissions if matching data is not matching, is missing, and it's often yeah discovered late in the process, right? Also from an audit readiness perspective, right? If you know that it takes you time to find the right data, right? You always naturally fall into this, calling it here firefighting mode, right? Instead of proactively managing it, you're basically reacting to yeah, to requests or queries around your data. And yeah, one piece is of course cross-functional alignment. What I mean here is, right, I know this topic for today is focused more on regulatory affairs, right? But also, for example, driven by IDMP, we're looking more into cross-functional alignment between not only within regulatory, but also with your labeling and supply chain teams, for example. But yeah, it's still unfortunately common practice these days that these different teams are not talking the same language. And these are yeah, basically just of some of the visible symptoms you actually see that you are maybe stuck in a chaos, right? Not saying that all of this, of course, always applies in all the cases, right? But it's a a risk factor if, of course, more and more of those symptoms pile up. Moving forward, I actually wanted to provide some more insights, right? Let's get real about this, right? I mean, yes, we can describe it on a qualitative level, right? But are there ways to quantify our chaos we live in? One I find powerful concept is the 110-100 rule. Basically, it says that for the case of data management, I mean it's a model, right? It's not a strict rule, I would say, but what it basically does, it defines what does it cost me in a correction phase, what does it cost me for cleansing, and what does it cost me basically if the error already occurs, basically the failure cost. So as an example here, right, you would spend $1 if you make sure that the person entering the data also enters the right data, right, making sure it's structured according to guidances and so on, and also the input is validated. If you then realize during the submission, right, your data, there's something off, it cannot be the case that this is the true value, right? Then we end up in what I described before, right? Your teams are struggling to find the right data, right? Then it basically goes 10 times in in effort, right, into basically cleaning that data at that stage to make sure it's there. And then basically the last step, as I mentioned, is kind of the failure cost. What does it cost us if, for example, right, the data has been incorrectly filed, or it gets raised during the audit? As you can imagine, then of course the impact is higher. Right, I mean, please don't start calculating. Right, it's called a rule. I see it more as a model just to illustrate, right, the effect of basically what can we save in that case, if we start fixing those errors, or not errors, but these try to even prevent these errors, right, if we fix it as early as possible. And here basically purely looking at cost, right? I mean, you can transfer the same into effort, hours spent of your teams doing this kind of work, right? Just to illustrate how this gap, this data chaos gap, can basically grow over time. There are some interesting statistics out there in terms of how much time people actually spend finding and fixing, reconciliating data. It depends a bit, right, how you define this, but right, 30 to 50% of employee time in certain roles actually spend of the time the employees spend is exactly for these kind of data gap remediation, reconciliating, right? Also there, don't look at the absolute numbers, but I would even say that, I don't know, even 10 or 20% is probably too high already. But it is just, yeah, unfortunate reality. Maybe not for all companies out there, but it is something, yeah, which a lot of people struggle with. So what do you do, right? In a sense of, hey, we're spending so much effort on finding the right data, trying to fix it, right? You can also add the layer of outsourcing, right? If you realize, hey, we don't have our data under control, you might think of outsourcing the issue. Of course, this comes again with additional costs, delayed time to market, basically every week or even every day, these issues in becoming submission ready are not fixed. It's basically also revenue wise and from a competition perspective, not beneficial for you, to say the least. And overall, right, compliance risk. I mean, yes, we're submitting all of this to be compliant, right? But in the worst case, you come to regulatory findings, rejection, recalls, which also has influence on your reputation. From all of this, right, the key message, I think what I would like you to keep away, right, it's not related to a system, right? I mean, yes, especially for larger companies, we use systems to manage data. In the following sections, I will also go a bit into some of those details why, yeah, it's not necessarily a system issue. It's more of a business issue if those things are not controlled as early as possible. So with this, actually would like to get already a bit of feedback. I mean, I appreciated that you're listening to me explaining it. I still would like to also hear from you. We actually have a little poll question prepared at this point of the presentation. Just for me or for us to know, right, if we are basically on the right track with whatever we are presenting here today, because it's one view of the whole issue just described. But of course, I would love to hear from you also if you more or less disagree where you stand related to this. So the question here is, how often does your team rely on spreadsheets or in a wider sense, let's say documents, to manage regulatory product data? So, I mean, yes, it says first daily, it's our primary tool. Maybe you use it weekly. You have a system and you're simply using it alongside the systems. Occasionally, you can imagine, right, you have cases where legacy data is for business reasons not entered in the system and still managed outside. That can be a case. But it also goes to rarely, so that you almost fully rely on systems for managing product data, up to basically never. If we can open up the poll, I would be very interested to see from the participants today where on this spectrum we stand with today's participants.
And I think it's up there, John. I see it popped up on my screen, so people should be able to vote.
Yeah, I also see it now. Maybe I'll just pause for a minute to see more votes coming in. Oh, we have already results. Oh wow, this is interesting. I hope everybody can see it, but I'll quickly go through it anyway. So the majority, more than 50% of today's participants say actually they use spreadsheets on a daily basis as a primary tool. We have another, 30, almost 40% using it on a weekly basis, and only 5% answering here occasionally. Very good to, good to see. In a sense, yes, it's good to see, meaning, yes, there is still work to do. Also good to see that basically at least some of those things I already presented in the first part are resonating. Obviously, I would have loved to see some more answering with rarely or never. But yeah, no, as I said, very, very interesting to see. I think shows also the relevance of this topic. But I think that also brings us then to the next section. What can we actually do about it, right? It's always the good first step, right, to realize the problem, maybe even quantify it, but then what can we do about it? All right, then for the next section, basically the shift, as I said, right, realizing the problem is one thing. What can we do about it? Moving from documents to data. Yes, one, I don't know, keyword I already used a couple of times in the first part, I think is around structured data. Yes, it is one means of making sure we resolve data chaos in the broadest sense. But I think the main message here is that it's just not structured data is not a technical upgrade, right? It's not just a shift in the format. Ideally, it's the entire foundation for a change to become more data driven. Why do we preach for structured data across the board? First of all, right, structured data enables interoperability across systems, meaning that if you manage the same piece of information maybe in multiple systems, it's of course easier to cross-reference, right? If the data is structured according to certain standards, it reduces duplication, and also what I described in the first part, the manual rework teams need to do to keep data in some form and shape. Keyword I think these days is automation and also AI readiness, right? Structured data is always seen on as basically one of the enablers, right, for automations, for regulatory processes. But also when it comes to more advanced AI techniques, right, maybe on the analytics side or even predictive capabilities, right, then it's I think the consensus along the industry is yes, data first before we do anything with AI. I know that there are people who might disagree with that statement, right? You could also say, hey, I use my AI to fix my data, but I think that's written on a different piece of paper. Reusability, I already mentioned about it, right? As part of one of the problems, right? The cross-functional misalignments between different teams, so outside of regulatory specifically. And then, format shift, right, towards structured data is following certain standards. I already mentioned ISO IDMP. But of course, everything else which comes along can also be put into this category, right? FHIR as the exchange standard, but also, right, what's currently happening in Europe on the product management service by EMA. I'll go a bit into this in a second as well. But what I want you to take away from here, right? It's structured data, but it's more like a strategic enabler for speed, insight, and cross-functional alignment. Yeah. I mentioned a couple of times already. I also told you already I don't want to go too much into detail today, because if you give me the floor, that's gonna take some minutes. Still want to focus at least on this slide on basically data first submissions, specifically IDMP PMS. That's something we with Intelligence are, as I said, quite busy to support our clients to get ready for IDMP, and basically also see beyond the compliance checkbox behind it, and see IDMP as an enabler for moving towards a data first mindset, basically. You can argue, right, data first submission. I mean, probably most of you know, right, with the shift also, what's on the horizon for our dossiers, in a sense of moving from or towards ECDD 4.0, right? I mean, it's just the reality. We will continue submitting documents, right? But also, right, in ECDD 4.0, or even if you look at the new revision of the ICH M4Q, right? I mean, there is a clear shift of even in documents providing more of a structured data than narratives, right? I think that's where we are coming from as an industry, right? Providing narratives of our clinical evaluations or something like this around the products. What we as a company are always preaching, right? You can also prepare your documents for data first submissions, in the sense that make sure that you don't hide data within your documents, right, in lengthy texts, but making sure that basically even from documents, then data can be easily extracted. For example, for your XCMPD submissions. Structured data submissions becoming mandatory. I mean, maybe could argue they are already mandatory, right? I mean, as you know, you have a certain amount of days after your product is approved to submit XCMPD data, which is structured data. And now with basically PMS replacing XCMPD in I'm not sure if I should say near future, but at least the midterm future, that also creates expectations towards your data set, which you need to be able to fulfill as a company. So really IDMP, defining the global standard for medicinal products. A lot of focus specifically at this moment for companies is going into the packaging piece. As you might know, for PMS, certain pack size information need to be entered in PMS directly. Yes, you could argue, right, we're still manually updating data in PMS at this moment, right? Is this where we want to go? Maybe not, right? Ideally, I think everybody would appreciate a so-called machine-to-machine exchange, right, from your internal system to the regulator system. But at the moment, as a first step, at least we're submitting structured data still manually, or a lot of manual work. But I think the shift from document-based submission to data exchange is, I think, clearly visible in the industry. I think we need to stop also talking about it as a future trend, right? It's happening at this very moment. As I already mentioned, right, there are certain deadlines. If you have critical medicines, you will be busy still entering data for this until the end of this year. But it's basically also the beginning, right? I mean, yes, we're submitting certain IDMP data according to defined use cases, but it will expand from there. So key message, it's not something in the future. It's basically happening now. One topic which basically should tell you how do we get there, right? How can we make sure that our data is aligned with the standards? How can we make sure that we have good enough data also to profit from automation opportunities? How can we make sure all the AI use cases we might or might not have yet defined can actually, value from good data? I and we as a company have a strong belief that data governance is a key piece of it, right? So how do we make sure that the data we have is basically trustable, reliable enough to enable all of those use cases which are currently out there, right? I mean, AI is all over the industry, right? I know that especially on leadership level, for a lot of companies, AI gets put on the agenda, but of course, my key message here is, right, we need to focus on the basis of good data to enable this. That's where data governance comes into place. Right, that's one of the topics I mentioned at the beginning. Yes, we can do a full deep dive, maybe future webinar idea, into data governance overall, right? I simply wanted to, right, put it in the spotlight here. How can it look like, right? Put a little chart together what a data governance setup from an organizational perspective could look like. I think the key message here is you need to define the roles clearly. And that's something, right? Yeah, I mean, you can roll it out as a full-blown project, right? But it can also be that internally within your teams, right? Assign a data steward, give them the responsibility to manage data on a day-to-day basis, right? Making sure it follows the definitions as a higher or more global position, you could say. Data owners for certain domains should be defined, right? So, for example, I mentioned the example at the beginning, like regulatory product data, right? Assign a data owner who takes accountability for a certain domain. And then, in terms of leadership, your chief data officer, which you ideally have in your company, plays a key role, basically ensuring that it's also aligned with any other enterprise data initiatives you have ongoing is there. But overall, right, good data, right? I mean, we want to have good data so that also users use it. So, right, make sure that in your data governance setup, right, business users are taken into consideration. And just to highlight this again, right, this is not one overview. This is what you need to do, right? I mean, this is just an example giving you kind of almost a minimum viable product in a sense that, hey, if you already define these roles, people have accepted their roles and understood what's expected, right? It's already a good start. Not saying, as I said, right, it needs to look like this everywhere, right? You can also define more roles if that applies to your company, right? If you're a bigger company with a larger portfolio, maybe you even want to think about data custodians, right? Managing it more on the technical level. But yeah, I think key message here again is it doesn't have to be a full-blown data governance setup, but you can start small with this as long as you define a clear ownership and also accountability for the data you have. And as I said, it's not for the sake of having it, right? Ideally, right, with a good data governance, you ensure high data quality, which enables you then to apply those to certain, for example, automation and AI opportunities. Right. I like the example here of the smart field population, right? If based on certain other data you have, right, you can already pre-populate certain fields, keep the human in the loop for verifying this entry, but then it's less effort on the initial data entry for your people. And then also, right, real-time dashboards. Yes, dashboards is sometimes used as a buzzword, right? For me, always a dashboard is only as good as the data it has and as the people who use it, right? But it is one clear use case where good data governance feeds into good data quality, and then also ensuring visibility on that data. Taking a quick break here, but moving already to actually the question we have coming up. There's another poll we prepared, basically focusing on structured data. What I would like to understand from you, how far has your organization already adopted structured data for broader regulatory operations? Right, it's descriptive here, but you can almost see it on a scale from 1 to 5, right? So are you still mostly document driven? Are there any initiatives internally if you have for mapping structured data? Maybe you're using IDMP as an active driver for getting there, up to, right, fully leveraging structured data across the business, right? Not only looking at regulatory here, but basically across the business. I think polling should be open now. I'll just give it a couple seconds for the votes to come in. I think you can still vote. Oh no, now we're closed. I think oh yeah, okay. Briefly checking results. I mean, I already had a strong feeling based on the answers you provided for the first question. Also here, almost half of the participants today say we're still mostly document driven. But we also have then, yeah, for the rest, a good split between already mapping, started to map structured data internally, piloting in for IDMP. Also, a number of folks have voted for this, and then I already see 20%. That's actually interesting to see integrated structured data across multiple functions, right? I think that's where the real power of structured data lies. Yes, you might be the owner as a regulatory affairs person, but then if you can make sure that it's shared also across functions with others, I think that's where the real benefits come. So good to see that already 20% of the votes today are on this one. No, thanks for voting. That's always right. I mean, transparency here, right? If you prepare such a webinar, it's always a tricky thing, right, to see where we are. So that's why I always like those little interactions in between. But yeah, good to see where we stand today. So apparently also, right, reiterating some of those things, making it as concrete, as hands-on as possible is exactly what we're trying to aim with this webinar. Quickly checking time. We have 20 minutes left. That's actually perfect to move to the last section already, right? The opportunity. How can we build resilient data ecosystems, right? Big work, data ecosystems, right? But I think what I would like us to get here to is doesn't have to be a full-blown data ecosystem within your company, right? It's more on almost on the individual level, what's for the day-to-day activities, right? What is happening? I think one of the things I'm always advocating for is to move away from reactive to proactive data management or data quality management for that matter. I already explained a bit of the firefighting scenario, right? What I mentioned at the beginning, right? Fixing errors on or after the submission deadline, scrambling during the audits, right? All of this is reactive, right? There is an issue with your data, and then you're trying to fix it. I like the expression of the tribal knowledge within the company, right? especially if you're longer in a company, right? Instead of relying on the systems, what's always not always, but sometimes happening, that you first of all trust the person who is there for the longest and knows the most about the data. So that's all kind of a reactive approach rather than actually a proper strategy on how to manage data quality proactively. So what I already mentioned at the beginning, right, with if you remember the 1-10-100 rule, validating data at the point of entry, right, that can prevent you from a lot of pain down the road. I illustrated it earlier in terms of costs, right? But again, right, it's effort, it's hours your team spent. So at the end of the day, also costs related. Implementing governed processes with clear roles, right? That's one of the things highlighted in the previous section. Make sure you have, I would say as a basis, data stewards defined who clearly know what they need to do and what the expectations is. And basically like this, you should reach a state where before an audit, for example, you're not panicking, but you know that your data and your systems are reliable enough, right? That also the traceability and transparency around your data is basically given. Again, right? It's something, right? Proactive data quality. It's probably easier put on a slide than put into practice, right? But I think building a core team in your organization, right? It can be as part of a data governance initiative. It can also be smaller than this, right? But I think especially that's what organizational change management is teaching us, right? I mean, you cannot change, or you can only change an organization if you change the people. I think that's one of the key points also in this scenario, right? People need to understand why they should be taking care of certain data quality measures and why it's relevant. One of the almost the last things for today, I wanted to briefly talk about what happens when basically regulatory data is structured and governed. Then it really becomes the business asset. That's also what I mentioned earlier already, right? A lot of focus is put into IDMP and IDMP readiness. Yes, for a long time it was always seen as a compliance requirement, right? As the kind of extension, if you like, of XCMPD. But I strongly believe that if executed and basically planted in the right way, it's really a business asset, right? Which can help you faster submissions. I hope I don't need to explain this too much, right? But of course, faster submissions means faster time to market and earlier revenue. Collaboration across regulatory labeling supply chain, I think it's coming back quite a couple of times. That's on purpose because it is quite an issue we still see, right? That basically, I don't know, your supply chain colleagues understand a product entirely different than what you might do within regulatory. What I also already mentioned, AI and analytics, right? Maybe also automations to mention here again, right? Structured data enables you to use AI and analytics, right? I hope most of you are familiar with the garbage in, garbage out principle, right? So if you're feeding your AI with I don't want to say garbage, but let's put it in a friendly context with unreliable data, right? I mean, don't expect to get a reliable output from it. And then, right? I mean, regulatory data becomes reusable across functions. That's the ideal scenario, right? It's regulatory data, but it shouldn't be for the regulator, right? I mean, it's still your own data. You're spending a lot of efforts within your team of structuring it, maybe governing it properly, right? So you also should be seeing it as a business asset rather than a compliance requirement. Yes, we have to submit something, right? But it's really a business asset. And then almost on the last slide for today. A couple of things, right? What can you do, right? I think what the main message here is, define what good data management or regulatory information management. What is good RIM for you? And again, right, I specifically exclude here the system part, right? I mean, as you noticed, I didn't talk today a lot about systems because I think a lot of those things, I mean, yeah, especially if you're a smaller company, right, you can manage a lot of those things even without systems, right? If the proper governance structure is basically behind it. I think the key message also for today, in a sense of, hey, it's not about what I already mentioned, right? A full-blown data ecosystem, fully fledged out data governance setup, right? It can be a small thing, right? And it's not something that's, you need to start from scratch, right? I mean, I know a lot of companies are actively using IDMP, what I mentioned on the slide before, right? As, or IDMP data, I need to say, then as a business asset, right? Yes, it is compliance driven, but there are of course other business use cases you can realize. For example, what I mentioned before, right? Making sure that your supply chain people understand if you say, or if you talk about the product in the same way than you do. I think fair data principles is something, right? Which, I mean, I really didn't touch a lot about it today. I mean, not specifically like this, right? But it is an underlying concept, right? If you, as a basis, can make sure that your data is findable, is accessible, interoperable, and also reusable, right? I think you're already on a good way. And as I said, right, of course, systems, if used properly, make this easier, but it's not the solution for everything. One thing, right? I mean, systems, I think so I said I don't want to talk too much about systems. What I actually would like to point the focus at is basically, basically the culture of your teams around it, right? I think defining a clear data ownership, data stewardship goes a long way when it comes to making progress. And that's also one of the key things on this slide, right? It's not about the, you need to have it fully fledged out. The perfection is about the progress of getting started, right? I basically put also here the ontologies, which are currently being developed for IDMP, but also now for CMC onto this, right? I mean, it's tools which can help you to get there, right? But it's by no means saying, oh, you need to invest all of your efforts into this. As I said, it's about starting small, making sure what you can control, you control, right? And then basically, taking it from there. Taking it from there brings me actually to last slide for today from my side. Good news is, as I mentioned today, you don't need to fully overhaul everything. Maybe you're already doing certain things. I know that most of you said, yes, we're still working document driven, right? But to evolve from there, basically, there's a clear call to action, which I would like you to keep away from here. Assess your current tools and workflows, right? That's basically identifying where is the biggest pain, right? Where do you encounter those issues I described at the beginning? Where is the reliance on spreadsheets causing issues or troubles down the line? Mapping this out, right, from there to understand basically, hey, there is data, but who actually owns it? Who maybe who puts it in this Excel sheet, right? Maybe who make sure it's also maintained, so it's also there, right? It's not about the perfection, right? But it's about the implementing basic measures of basically data governance. Cross-functional teams, I'm not going to repeat it. Maybe I overdid this already for today. And then prioritizing quick wins. I'm actually not a big fan of quick wins, but usually people immediately know what is meant. I mean, what is quick and what is a win, right? But I think key here is start with the high impacted areas, right? Where where did you identify in basically step number one where the pain is the highest, focus on this. And as I mentioned, right, it's about getting started, to move away from the predominantly document-based process to a data-driven way of working. Then we can already launch the last questions I have, or last question I have for you today. Basically, with this call to action now, what I would love to understand from all of you is basically what's the barrier, right? What is the biggest barrier at this moment stopping you from, basically getting started or progressing in your data quality journey? Is it the clear lack of ownership or governance? Is it the limited automation or tooling you have? Is it still cross-functional misalignment you're experiencing within your or beyond your teams? Is it resource based? Are there constraints there? Or is it simply not a priority for your company, right? Maybe your biggest barrier isn't mentioned here. Maybe then select the ones which resembles this the most. Maybe we can actually use this then for the Q&A if there are any other barriers which you see which are not maybe listed here, but it's just a good question to understand what is it really that that holds us back with progressing further towards data-driven mindset. I hope everybody has voted. I would say we can slowly close this so that we still have some time for Q&A. Oh, okay. Seeing the results now. Interesting to see. Let me quickly. Oh yeah, okay. So the majority of the votes went to clear or lack of clear ownership and governance. Nobody is suffering from limited automation tooling, right? I mean, could be the case that this is kind of a follow-up onto this one, right? But it seems really that the basics, which I also tried to highlight here with around roles, data governance, and so on, is the major driver here. 50% don't see it as priority yet. That's also interesting to see. Would be interested, what is the priority then? But I guess that's something maybe we can pick up now in the Q&A. No, thanks everybody for voting. As I mentioned, it's always very, very good to see in a sense of, where do we stand? Is this topic actually resonating? I'm almost happy to see that data governance is still one of the biggest issues. Also keeps us busy, of course, but it is something we truly believe that it's the core to a lot of the issues we encounter on a day-to-day basis. And I think with that, I will move on, which brings me to actually the Q&A session. I know we only have a couple of minutes left. Basically, right before we open up the floor for your questions, maybe just one last thought here, right? I mean, I'll let you read the key takeaways by yourself, but I think for me it's key that, right, regulatory data is often seen as something we manage. I mean, right, regulatory information management, but if we flip this on the side, right, or on its head, what if data or regulatory data becomes really that something is working for us, right? Something that drives speed, insight, and also then strategic value. I know that's conceptually right, but I hope from today's session, from the presentation during the last minutes, you can take some of those points away. And it's not something maybe to immediately reach the highest level, but again, right, key point is let's get started. Let's do what's in our control. What is bothering us the most, where are the biggest problems, right? And basically taking from there. For the last minutes, yeah, let's hand it over to you. I would love to see what's resonating, what's challenging, but then also what's next for you teams, maybe, right? I mean, Q&A, yes, please put questions in, but you can also, right, use this more basically also to share, right? What are things maybe your company is busy with?
All right, John, you've got some questions that came in the Q&A tab, so I'll just go through those for you. And by the way, you got a very nice compliment on your intro quote. That was popular. So first question, sometimes a structured spreadsheet's better than an unstructured digital system. Could you give us some ideas and tips to better structure spreadsheets and digital database systems?
Yeah. It seems to come back to one of the points I mentioned, right? It's not necessarily about systems all the time. I know a lot of focus in the industry, right, is put onto selecting, implementing the right system. But what I already mentioned, right? Yeah, if your company size allows it, you can manage most of these things within an Excel sheet, right? I mean, yeah, spreadsheets. You probably suffer from a proper versioning concept, right? That's something where spreadsheets sometimes fall short in a way that, you know, you're not going to have for each of the fields entered in a spreadsheet a proper versioning, right? But even assigning, right, your data owners to each of the data elements, right? This is where spreadsheets are good in a sense that, yeah, I think everybody knows how to use Excel, right? This is something where this initial barrier of actually using proper structured data, it can be lowered, right? Instead of, right, onboarding your people to a complicated system where they need to click to several screens to get to the information, right? If your Excel is structured in a way that people easily find what they need to, right? I mean, then it fulfills the purpose, right? That's for me the key, right? I mean, yes, I don't know, me personally, right? I would move to a system whenever possible, right? Because as I said, the versioning is one of the things, right? When did a certain data element got changed? Who changed it? Why was it changed? And so on, right? For these kind of things, managing it in the systems are easier, but yeah, spreadsheets are okay if you used the right way. I think that's the main message.
All right. And then maybe related to that is, what about a company that's looking to move beyond spreadsheets? Where do you recommend that they start?
Yeah. Start looking at yourself in the sense of, hey, does it actually make sense for us in a way of what is the model you're following, right? I mean, there are companies out there who decide to decentralize their data management. There are companies out there managing it all centralized, right? From this point onwards, I would, you know, continuing the story in a sense, hey, is a system actually gonna help us with this, right? And then, I mean, yeah, you have the system vendors out there, right? I think what is key there, yeah, I often get the question, hey, what is the best RIM system for us? The typical consultant answer is always, it depends. And it's not because, you know, I don't want to tell you, but it's really because it depends. But I would look, right, what are the business use cases I want to fulfill with implementing a system potentially, right? Maybe out of this analysis, right, where do you currently stand, it comes out, hey, maybe system is actually not what we need at the moment, right? But to start internally to see what there is before you actually go out there and talk to vendors, I think is a key step, which sometimes is overlooked. I see that some companies realize, hey, we have an issue with our data quality is not good, and they immediately start looking to, you know, purchasing a system, which yes can help, but it can also, you know, create more damage if not managed properly.
All right. And Sean, I think with that, we need to wrap up. We're right at time. So thank you very much. Super insightful. And everyone out there on the webinar, thank you so much for your questions. We appreciate it. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks everybody for participating. Have a great day.